Open your Bibles with me to Genesis. Frank, it's right there in the beginning, man. Boom, you got it. Genesis. And we're going to go to Genesis starting with chapter 17. Actually, 18. A man stands, and then he sits on a rock. As he looks toward the east, early morning, smell the smell of sulfur in the distance. As he sees dark smoke rising from multiple places. The entire Rift Valley, that was at one time so beautiful, has now been torn asunder. If only I could have saved them. If only there were just 10. A couple days earlier, we have a moment that happens in Genesis chapter 18. I start with verse 1 as we get the context of the negotiator. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre. Interestingly enough, his name is now Abraham. Before his name was Abram, and no one knew his new name, but it seems that these visitors did know this new name. In fact, they even mentioned the new name of Sarai, which had become Sarah. But I get ahead of myself. He was sitting down under the great trees of Mamre, while sitting at the entrance of the tent in the heat of the day, 10 to 11 in the morning, as it starts to become warm and strong in the heat of the day. He saw that there were 3 men standing nearby. He saw them, and he quickly hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. This is very Asian, Middle Eastern. If somebody comes, even if it's Bedouin, someone comes, they are your visitor. And we serve each other and help, unless it was somebody like an enemy or something. That's different. But these 3 show up. Abraham does not necessarily know who they are, but he begins to discover who they are. In fact, you know who they are, whether you know this or not. Verse 3, he said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord." Do you notice my Lord? The L-O-R-D is lowercase. L-O-R-D, you see that? He's not saying the word personal name of the Lord. He's referring, it's a nice way of saying, sir. Sir, gentleman, so to say, or somebody that, is higher status than yourself, to give honor to that person. If I've earned favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought. And of course, have you ever been to this part of Israel, southern Israel, near the desert? It's warm. In fact, he's up there on the western side of the Rift Valley, what we call just to the west of what we call the Dead Sea today. But at one time, that wasn't a Dead Sea. That valley was filled with beautiful grass. It was very nice. It was the place where Lot, his cousin, wanted to go and live, in the cities of Sodom, Gomorrah, Zoar, and others. Those cities that we hear in our heads, when you hear Sodom and Gomorrah, a lot of times we think negative. But actually, it wasn't negative. These were prominent cities and with large trading in amongst themselves. And in fact, at the location in Madaba, with archaeological evidence, we can see the pottery. These places were up to date at the time. I know we look back at it and say, oh yeah, they just whatever. But in the pottery, the singed pottery that has been found in many museums you find, in Jordan, especially on that side of the Jordan, Israel, Jordan, on that side of the Dead Sea, you find a lot of pottery. And it was ahead of its time when it comes to the look of it, the beauty. In other words, the intricacies of it, even if it has been singed and destroyed. You can see that in the ancient world. When you go to Egypt, you can see when things are specific. You look and you say, oh, it's just a bunch of rocks. But if you're an archaeologist and you go and you go, wow, these guys were technological. They knew how to make holes in granite like this. No chisels. Somehow they had tech that we think they didn't have. They had. And we see that. You can see it. Actually, if you go on Netflix, you'll see perhaps a series called Ancient Apocalypse, where it deals with how technology was far beyond what our scientists say it was. And so, we have these interconnections. Sodom and Gomorrah was a location of purchasing and selling items. It was a beautiful place. That's why Lot wanted to go there. And Abraham is up. He did not want to been down where that area was. He wanted to stay. He was more Bedouin. He stays in the hot desert land. But yet, when someone comes by and there's no water, what you do is you share your water. You share your food. And immediately, he says, stay here. I can rest. You can rest under my tree. And verse 5, let me get you something to eat so that you may be refreshed. And then you can go on your way. Now that you have come to your servant. Very well, they answered. I love this how it says they. How many were there? Yeah. Some have asked, well, I'll get into this. We'll get into it in a second. Very well, they answered. Do as you say. Verse 6, so Abraham, of course, hurried into the tent to Sarah. Quick, he said, get 3 shehlas of the finest flour and knead it together and bake some bread. How do you like guys? Welcome to guys. Comes to Sarah and says, make some bread right now. What? I'm sure that actually she had been making it, but he's trying to say, can we have, because the company, it's not just Abraham and Sarah. Actually, if you know anything about the story of Abraham, he actually had enough people in his camp to even have an army, 400 people. And they conquered the kings of the north, if you'll remember earlier in the book of Genesis. So he had a big amount of people. So it wasn't just like, we think of it as like 3 people with towels on their heads. It doesn't work like that. It was real. Abraham was the father of a nation. He was beginning it at that time, even though he had no children. And he was very old. So he comes to Sarah and says, put together some bread. And then he asked for one of the calves, one of the young animals, to come and be served, to be slaughtered and made. And I know that's how the ancient culture is. Today you'd say, go to Albertsons. You'd say, go to the corner store and get something. But when you're in the ancient world, you can't say, go to Albertsons. You say, go get the cow and bring them, and we'll have a meal together. And so, actually even talked about having curds, the cheese curds and everything. Have them prepared before. And while they ate, this is now in verse 8, he brought them some curds and milk. You know what curds are? Do you know what curds? I'm going to get hungry already. Curds are the edges of cheese, where you're making cheese, the edges. Oh, the edges. I have to tell you, I do eat cheese, especially the curds. All right, so anyway, they're very delicious, and they're not cheap either, usually, generally speaking. And so he came and he brought them the milk, curds, and the calf that had been prepared and set before them while they stood there under the tree. Where's your wife? What does he say? Sarah. Her name was Sarai. But God in the previous chapter had changed her name. They knew. Abraham says, these guys are not typical visitors from the desert. He says she's in the tent. Then one of them said, I will surely return to you at this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a what? Son. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance of her tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were very old, and Sarah was past the childbearing age. So Sarah, what? Laughed to herself. After I am worn out, my Lord is old. Will I now have this pleasure? Ladies, I'm not sure if you want the pleasure, right? But yet, if you think about it, you don't have a child in the ancient world. That means your family line is done. In fact, Abraham had already kind of planned to have Eliezer from Damascus be in the line. It says it earlier, that Eliezer of Damascus was, and God says, he shall not be, but your child. This was God that had come. Sarah comes out and says, I didn't laugh. They said, why did she laugh? I didn't laugh. Oh, yes, you did. Is anything too difficult for God? So now comes the next part. And a lot of times we think about this part, but this leads us into the next part of the story. When the men got up to leave, by the way, this is the time when Abraham is nervous. You don't get that pit of your stomach. God had always spoken to Abraham, but he had never met him face to face. Did he meet him or three angels, or was one of them the Lord? Uppercase L-O-R-D. When it's all uppercase, it's the tetragrammaton. It's the Yod, He, Waw, He, Yahweh. Personal name of God. The prototype of the one we call Jesus. The one, when Jesus said, I saw Abraham. Remember that? He did see Abraham. He was there. So in verse 16, when the men got up to leave, they looked down towards Sodom. Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. And we're dealing with ancient culture. You walk someone out. When someone leaves, you don't just say, bye, and you walk away. What happens is you walk them out a bit of a distance. And as they're going, I can imagine the air moving, and as the heat of the day was receding, as it's maybe about 6, 5 in the afternoon, the air is flowing. You look down to that beautiful plush valley. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Verse 18. Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him, so that he will direct his children. Do you notice that? Direct his children. You're going to have a kid, right? And his household after him to keep the ways of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised. Verse 20, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grievous, that I will go down to see what they have done, and see if it's as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, then I will know. The men turned away toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before who? Verse 22. Are you with me? Before L-O-R-D, all uppercase. Maybe 2 of the men took off. Maybe 3 of the men took off. I don't know, but now he speaks directly to the Lord. Okay, he knew how Sodom and Gomorrah was. And in fact, if you go to the next chapter, you will see how Sodom and Gomorrah is. Those angels, 2 of them, go down to Sodom and Gomorrah. And they stay in the city center. And Lot, of course, says, come to my house, because he knows Sodom and Gomorrah. Some people like to say certain things about Sodom and Gomorrah and their culture, but really, what the big deal was, is they were violent to those outsiders that were there. And in fact, that was the thing. It was, I'm not going to get into the specific words here on YouTube, but they actually were very pushy, literally. Sodom and Gomorrah did not care. In fact, the guys. Now I know in cities that are with good people, there are good people, but oftentimes it is the worst of us that lead, right? Sometimes that happens. A city is judged by the loudest mouths and the strongest hands, generally speaking. Abraham knew that city. And by the way, that was the reason why he actually saved that city in a chapter before. I believe it was Genesis chapter 14. He saved them. He knew who they were. That's why he wanted to stay away. But Lot lived there with them. He knew what was going to happen. If God goes down there, they are as good as toast. But I want you to ask yourself now something very important. If you knew Los Angeles was going to be destroyed, if you knew Los Angeles was going to be destroyed, and God told you, what would you say? Psst, I'm out of here. Blow them away? I'm gone. I'm a good Christian. They deserve it. Have you ever felt like that? I know there's times in our history I have said in my own heart, these guys, on Judgment Day, you get that shaky feeling. On Judgment Day, God, take them down now. Have you ever felt like that? Maybe you're on the left or on the right. You felt the same either way, right? This is a human problem we all have. We all want people we don't like to be taken down. But let's take a look at what Abraham does. Let's read. So, actually says he's standing before the Lord. Verse 23, then Abraham, what? That word approach is a word in Hebrew, nagash. Nagash. It's used in the context of negotiating. This almost reminds me of, Anna. When I got with Anna for the first time over in Bangkok, we'd go to a store, and they say, the thing is, 1,000 baht. And I'd say, well, and Anna's like, no. It needs to be, 300 baht. Okay, it's back and forth starts happening. Ding! Now all of a sudden, the person, oh no, I wouldn't sell it for any less than 900 baht. Well, I don't have the money, so I can only pay like 400 baht. And eventually the price, have you been there? The price slowly drops, especially with a guy with a white face comes around, the prices are always higher. That's why you never see the little tag on there, right? Oh, when I'm in the Middle East, we get this all the time. I remember at one of our Israel trips, we have someone from Ridgecrest that was always competing with Anna about prices. Let's see, which one? How much you get? Oh, Anna, you beat me. Oh, my goodness. Well, I got a good deal on this one. Back and forth, back and forth. It's the negotiator. And Abraham knew how to negotiate. He stepped up to negotiate. But my question is who was he negotiating with? Is that appropriate? I'm going to ask you that question. Is that appropriate? Let's read. So, number one, he says, he stepped up and he says, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away to spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous people that are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. You see his negotiation? Will not the judge of the earth do what is right? Ooh, Abraham. Wow, that's tough, huh? He talked directly to God like this. This is, I think, well, I'm going to get to that in a second. If I was God, what would I think? Maybe I'd be upset. I'd be like, who's this guy telling me what to do, right? But remember, it's Nagash. He's negotiating. We're dealing with culture. God comes into your culture. He descends into our culture and understands us who we are. He doesn't judge us by his own standards. He judges us through understanding us and then making sure that we follow the principles of the Ten Commandments through that. And so, God says an amazing thing. Let's take a look. Verse 26. The Lord said, the Lord, directly, L-O-R-D, all uppercase. If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake. Wow, that was easy. Abraham breaks the rules of negotiation now. Whenever you find your price, you're not supposed to change it, right? What if I said, I remember in India once, this happened with Anna and I. I gave a lowball price and the guy says, deal. I went, and Anna's like, we should have said less. You know what I mean? But after we said deal, if you come back and say, oh, no, I want it for 200 instead, forget it. It's over. It doesn't work. But look at how God is. I want you to read this. So he says, verse 27, Abraham spoke up again. Now that I have been so bold to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of righteous is 5 less than 50? A negotiator, 5 less than 50. It's only 5. Will you destroy the whole city for the lack of only 5 people? Guess what God does? If I find 45 there, I will not destroy it. Whoa. Abraham again called right on there. Abraham breaks the law, the rules of negotiation again. Once again he spoke up. What if only 40 are found there? Immediately God says, for the sake of 40, I will not do it. Verse 30, then Abraham says, may the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 righteous people can be found there? Now let me stop right there, and I want you to think about this. Some people tell me that he's trying to get to Lot and his family. He just wants to save Lot and his family. But you know, Abraham could have said something about that. He could have said, you know, you can fry those people over there, but you know, Lot and my kin, could you save them? But he didn't say that. You know why he didn't say that? Because he knew that Lot and his family would be saved by God. He knew that. He knew that God would call them. He wasn't worried about that. Who is he thinking about? Who do you think? These people who have done sometimes some of the most heinous things and forced others. You know, the kind of slavery there was in some of these Canaanite cities was unbelievable. You can find it today. You can find the ancient iron or bronze locks to put around a female's neck and lock her up and hold her and it would say, holy to my master, the Baal. And that oftentimes meant the owner. You see this. You find it, the roots in the ancient culture. You see that some of these cities even had child sacrifice that sometimes happened. You see this in the layers of stone and rock. Abraham knew who he was talking about. He knew that there was going to be a fire from heaven if God really judges them. And yet, guess what he does? He puts his soul, his own nefesh, on the line for them. Do you think God was upset by Abraham? What do you think? No? I know that's the one we're supposed to say, right? But actually, if you think about it, that was the work of Jesus. Do you know Jesus is proud of us and happy to see us caring for others, even if they don't deserve it? Because just like Jesus died for a world that needed saving, are we willing to put our neck on the line for others? Do you care about Los Angeles? Tahanga, Crescenta? Do you care? Or is it just people out there that, if they're gone, they're gone? It's not my deal. That's my question today. Abraham felt it necessary to bargain with God for life. I am reminded of the story of Oskar Schindler. Have you ever seen Schindler's List? Where at the end, he's bargaining to buy. He literally was making his business go bankrupt buying people to get them out of Auschwitz. And in fact, at the end, after his list was put together and everyone had been pulled out, he looked and he had a car, and he says, this car could have bought 5 people. This pin, the Nazi pin he had, the gold pin, could have bought 1 person. Why did I not spend more? And that's when, of course, those Jewish people who were saved, so to say, by being on that list during the death camp ending, they crowd around him. And to this day, you can go to Israel and see the righteous Gentile. You can go to his grave there on the eastern side of Jerusalem. The one who cares even though he doesn't need to care. So the same way Abraham cares, and my question to you is, do you care? We care about ourselves and our family and our friends and our buddies. But in our lives, do we act as if those who do not know about Jesus and there is a coming destruction, do we care? Really care? We must learn in some way to share in some way, because there are those who are in need. And it doesn't matter with whatever sin may or may not be done. The truth is there a human being that Jesus died for, cares about, loves, and the question is whether or not we're willing. Now, I'm not suggesting that all of those in Sodom and Gomorrah will not. There are some, I believe, as it says in the Bible, there are many who did not know God, and they learn later on. It's like you in heaven, you find out when the resurrection. God, there are people that lived as a law unto themselves. And so we find that in the world. We're going to find many people who did not even know the name of Jesus that will be in heaven. We know that. But the thing is what are we willing to do for others? Look at this. He negotiates all the way down. He keeps going. Verse 31, now that I have been so bold to speak, says maybe if only 20 are found there. And God says, or let me say, instead of saying the word Yahweh, let me say Yeshua says, Jesus says, for the sake of 20, I will not destroy it. Then in verse 32, then again he said, may the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only what? 10 can be found? And he answered, the Lord answered, if 10, for the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. Unfortunately, the only ones in the city that were righteous seemingly were just, at least at that point, 3. Lot, the 2 daughters, and even mom passed away in the explosion. The sulfuric explosion that's incredible, and we see Abraham on that mountain the next day, and it says it right there later on in chapter 19 as he's looking up and he sees like a furnace of the fire coming up. And to this day, we go to the Dead Sea and we can see the results of the destruction. It's not just Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom, Gomorrah, Zoar. There's 3 other cities that are destroyed. All of them are listed there. Completely destroyed. And that Rift Valley then became, and to this day, is filled with sulfur, where things do not grow. That's what makes the Dead Sea so beautiful, right? I always thought about the Dead Sea. As a kid, I said, is it black? Because I always think about it, no, it's white, it's clean. Salt cleans and cleanses, sulfur cleanses. And as we sit with Abraham on that mountainside and look toward the east, over the valley, I want to ask you how much time you allocate in your life to caring about the city around you and the people you go to work with. Do you share any bit of the gospel in your life with them? How is it that we respond as people? It's easy to say over there. It's another thing to care. Abraham stands on a limb with us this morning. And my question is to you, is if the world at some point is dying, and we can see that in front of our eyes right now. We can see things kind of falling apart, don't we? You see a little of that? At the same time, where do we stand? What can we share with others so that they might find the life that God has given to us? My friends, Jesus loves you so much. But we like to say that. But if I remember correctly, in John 3:16, it said, God so loved his people, right? What does he say? The world. Do you know the word world? If you go to the Bible, you will find over and over the world is always negative. The world. Don't live like the world. Don't do as the world does. And then we Adventists, as growing up, I say, don't be worldly, right? But then you take that same word, cosmos, in Greek. For God so, what? Loved the world that he gave his only, one and only Son, that whosoever might believe in him shall not perish, but have what? Everlasting life. It's time to share, my friends. And I know you can do it. I know you can have it. I know you have it in you. Even if you don't know anything from the Bible and you start learning today, God gives you seeds that are called mustard seeds, and they grow as faith does. And if you have just a little kernel of a seed, maybe one day that seed will turn into a gigantic tree that others will see, and they will find that seed of faith in their lives. I'm calling you to give your life to Him today.